We are going to have to discuss tonight a subject which is very important for everyone who is beginning the preparatory technique to understand. At the present time, by this meeting, all of you have been practicing the prep technique for about a week. This means not only that you've had a great deal more experience in experiencing just exactly what the prep technique itself is, but in addition, you may be beginning to experience some of the effects of the prep technique in your daily life. And some of these effects that have to do with what we might call growth experiences. And these growth experiences I would like to discuss very briefly with you tonight. Now, I think the most basic principle, one that we all have to understand, is that the process of growing is always a process of changing. That in fact it's a contradiction in terms to speak of growing without changing. Imagine a flower which was to grow and yet at the same time not to change.
To grow through our meditational practices. When we come to a realization that this pattern created by no one else but by me, this pattern is harmful to me and to my environment. When we come to the realization that this tendency in me that has created this pattern is not evolutionary, but is stagnatory, or even retrogressive, devolutionary. Once we come to that realization, then with the free will given to us, we try and change the tendencies and we try and change the pattern. The very moment we sincerely and earnestly try and change that pattern towards betterment, and all patterns can be remodeled, reshaped, and changed. As soon as we start changing that pattern of our existence, we are automatically invoking another power, and that, as Amrit has said, is the law of grace. Now, where does the law of grace reside? The law of grace resides in our decision, in our action, in changing the pattern. The total law of grace resides, can be brought to reside in that very moment of decision. That very moment of decision determines how much of the law of grace we can invoke, how much it can be invoked, and how well it can be used. Now, forgiveness is a quality which we consciously do, which a human being consciously does. Most of the times when we forgive someone, that forgiveness is not necessarily sincere. That forgiveness is not necessarily sincere. That forgiveness can be motivated by many, many factors. We can forgive a person that has done us wrong so that we can feel superior to that person. We can feel superior to the person and say, I can forgive you. That is ego boosting. Ego boosting. We can forgive someone to make our environment know that, how magnanimous Mrs. Jones is. She has forgiven that person. That too is ego boosting, prestige, false prestige building. So, even in our acts of forgiveness, we are motivated through forgiveness is only valid, forgiveness is only valid if it comes from a sincere love and understanding. Now, a human being with his limited mind is capable of that true love and understanding in order to be able to forgive. To be able to forgive is to be graceful. To be able to forgive is to be graceful. Now, if we can do that in a limited form, if we can do that with our small limited form, then a much vaster, greater form than us can do it in a far greater, unlimited measure. But this law of grace demands from you to be worthy of the grace. That law of grace demands of us that we should be worthy of that grace. Now, how can we be worthy of that grace? Is by changing the tendency, changing the pattern of our life. By changing the pattern in that moment of decision, we are invoking the law of grace. Immediately the decision is made, sincerely, immediately some law, some grace is felt, and it is always an uplifting feeling. It is always an uplifting feeling. And as we change, our tendencies more and more does grace descend upon us. Now, what is grace? What is grace? It is something very simple. A plant grows. A plant grows. It has all the minerals, the water, the sunshine, and every quality that is conducive to its growth. But there is something else that makes it grow. There is something else that makes the plant grow. In spite of the proper seed, in spite of all the conditions that are conducive for the plant to grow, the plant won't grow if there is an artificial factor. So there has to be a genuine factor in the nature of things, in the nature of the seed, in the nature of the mineral, in the nature of the wind and sun and rain, that will make that plant grow. And that is the law of grace. Forever existing, forever there, all the time, for us to draw from directly. But what can help a lot is this. If we have the good fortune of being close in thought or in physical presence or thousands of miles away, just in thought, with a person who is enlightened and with the thought connection that is formed with such a living entity, law of grace is eternal. But if a connection can be formed with a living entity, then a human link is formed. One human forms a link with another human, and because of the human impulse, the law of grace is quickened and more activated, so that it helps us in our spiritual path. It helps us in our spiritual path. The law of grace is an abstract quality. It is an abstract quality. Grace is abstract. But grace can be experienced through the concrete by having that sincere, devoted link filled with love, by having that sincere, devoted love link with a concrete object whereby the law of grace can be brought to us more tangibly and more quickly. Oh, thank you. Would you like some? How about you? Sure. And, thank you, Amrit, and because of the human impulse, one can be in touch more quicker, more directly, more efficiently, more effectively with the law of grace. But yet the law of grace still says deserve and then demand. Deserve and then demand. Another thing the law of grace does is this, that becoming deserving, that by becoming deserving, all the impressions, all the karma performed in all these lifetimes will have to be paid for. You cannot escape your karma. No one can escape his or her karma. Even divinity, we call God, can take away your karma from you. You have to pay for it. Yes. But how do we pay for it? Is very, very much affected by the law of grace if we can invoke the law of grace. For example, you have to pay someone £2,000. Good. Right. You have to pay the £2,000. Now, if you fill the bags £2,000 in pennies, pennies, right, it is going to be very heavy for you to carry £2,000 in pennies right through to London. What a terrible, arduous burden. Yes. Law of grace makes you pay that £2,000 not in pennies but by check. Yeah, and that check does not bounce. You see? You still have to pay, right? But the payment is made easy for you, and sometimes even extended terms, installments. You see? Yes, yes. So everything we have done in our lives, there is a law of retribution. We do bad, we will reap bad. We harm someone, we get harmed in return. It's inevitable. But by changing our tendencies, by changing the pattern, we are able to repay more easily. We don't need to carry those loads of pennies to London, but we can post a check. Yeah. And that is how things are made easier for us by the law of grace, if only we invoke the law of grace. There are many other aspects to this, but we'll suffice it with this for now. Okay. Right. Good.
We have maybe time for this about 6-7 minutes left until 9 o'clock. We have maybe
No, but we should finish by now.
And
We
then
should
we'll
finish
have
by
to
now.
clear out and
By 9:30?
Well, as soon as we can after that.
yeah,
Okay.
after, well, Raj has got to see some, haven't you?
Do I have any appointments?
Just one couple which have seen.
Oh, good. And then at home, are there any appointments? No. Wasn't there something after 10 tonight?
No, tomorrow.
What do you think tomorrow? Okay, fine. So let's have another question that will last for half an hour.
Raj,
Oh, the first downloading, we don't have extended time. Oh, time is such a bother. You know, what I would like to do is see each and every one individually and spend at least an hour with each and every one and just sharing the vibrations of each other's hearts. Even without saying a word. It'd be so nice, so nice. A lot of wisdom can be spoken in silence. Oh yes, oh yes. Good. Our friend up there.
Looking back in the scriptures, you see that people like Buddha and Krishna and Christ were very good conjurers, where miracles and that sort of thing. Now, you don't usually see Maharishis that are performing miracles, and I haven't seen you doing it, you were talking about changing the style of teaching to suit the era. Now, is this happening? Is this the reason why we don't see these strange happenings, or hear about them? I mean, for instance, if you read Paramahansa Yogananda's book about his Param Babaji, well, he's a great conjurer. I've never seen one of these chapters here. So did you answer a few questions?
Fine. Now, it is an understanding and an understanding and an understanding. There are many kinds of understandings. Limited understandings, more unfolded understandings, and really proper understandings. Now, the miracle performers are cheaper by the dozen. I can teach any one of you here within a period of 12 months how to levitate. If you practice hard, you'd be able to do it. Yes, right. Good.
How many want to sign up for the course?
Right. Now, these, I tell you how this works. These are, to talk of levitation, let me explain you this. It's very quick. Right. On every square inch of our body, there is 16 pounds of air pressure. And on every square inch of our body, there's 16 pounds of air pressure, and that pressure is keeping us down on this earth. Mind you, most people don't have their feet firmly planted on this earth. But that is the scientific law, and with 16 pounds of air pressure, on every square inch of our body, we are down on standing on this ground, on this earth. Now, if you want to levitate, what you do, because of thought force, and thought is also matter, so by thought force, you create a vacuum around yourself. And by the creation of a vacuum around yourself, you are preventing that pressure upon yourself. So when there is no pressure upon yourself, you just rise up. That is levitation, very easily done. Good. Now, when it comes to these seeming miracles, the real yogis, the men of God, do not pay much attention to these siddhis. In Sanskrit, they are called siddhis. Right. Through certain practices, which you will find in Raj Yoga, you can achieve these powers. Anyone can. Good. But those, you have described it correctly, that was conjuring. Now, at certain periods of the world's history, when certain teachings had to be given to certain elementary, primitive minds to make them believe, when the scriptures say, you must have faith, thou shalt believe. Right. Now to implant that belief in their minds, these very elementary vibrational forces were manipulated. And that is the meaning of so-called miracles. I was saying to someone this morning that 60, 70 years ago, if you told someone that a 2,000-ton machine can go through the air, they would say you are mad. And if you could show that, then they would regard it to be a miracle. But today, to us, is something natural. King Solomon's Mines, when, I think it is that book, where this man went to a primitive place, and he had a glass eye, and he took his eye out and put it there, and he told the Aborigines, the natives, that you work well, I'm watching you. All right. The man was far away, but he left his glass eye there. And to them it was a miracle. There he left his eye. Right. The other man was standing 200 yards away, pulled a trigger, and the man standing 200 yards away was instantly killed. Miracle. Yes, it's a miracle. Right. The primitive man only understood the meaning of a spear and a bow and arrow. He actually saw the arrow going, he actually saw the spear being hurled and hit the other man, while the bullet is so fast it was not seen, and that person, the victim, died, so the natives regarded it to be a miracle. Right. Now, these are all natural laws. Things we don't understand are regarded to be miracles. Things we don't understand are regarded to be supernatural. But when we understand these laws functioning and how they function, they cease to be miracles and they cease to be supernatural. So, there were times in the world's history where the eye had to be taken out and the bullet had to be shot and various things had to be done so that people would believe. If these are historical factors or not, we do not dispute that. But in my experience, I met a yogi in India, and a naked yogi. He just had one blanket. I went to see him, and it was near eating time, lunchtime, and he says, what would you like to eat? I mentioned one or two fruits that were favorites of mine, like chiku. It's a lovely Indian fruit. I said, I would like chiku, bananas, fine. So he pulls his blanket around him, and he opens his blankets again, and there was beautiful bananas and chikus, and they tasted beautiful too, because I ate them. Right. Now, these are miracles. It does not require self-realization to perform miracles. If you read a book, Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain, right, fine, you would find quoted there a woman who can sit here and move solid objects. What is the process called? PK? Psychokinesis, right, PK, in short, PK. Right. That is a miracle. You're sitting here and you're moving this glass from there to there. Miracle. These are activations of very elementary lower energies. We, my gurus, have always warned that as you progress in the path of evolution, as you reach self-realization, as you become what you really are, then do not be sidetracked by these temptations. We leave the front door of our home to reach the gate. Good. On the way, are you comfortable with it? On the way to the gate, we pass the garden. In the garden, there are beautiful flowers and shrubbery and the lovely lawn. Good, fine. As we pass through the garden path, we admire the flowers and the lawn and the shrubbery, but we do not forget reaching the gate. We're going to get out of the gate, into the car, and go where we want to go. Fine. We do not get lost, or we do not get sidetracked by the things that come in our path. Fine. A man that wants to achieve self-realization, or a self-realized man, does not go for these conjuring tricks, because they are just a ordinary, simple manipulation of certain kinds of vibrations. And that, to us that don't understand them, call them miracles, as the natives called it a miracle when the man took out his glass eye. Fine. But we have seen miracles in our organization. We have seen miracles here in England under BMS. We have seen miracles in the International Foundation for Spiritual Unfoldment, which covers societies throughout many countries. In Rhodesia, we call it the Rhodesian Meditation Society. In Britain, we call it the British Meditation Society. In Australia, we call it the Australian Meditation Society. Like that, all these various branches of the one organization has been reporting miracles and miracles and miracles daily. And what is the greatest miracle, would you ask? What is the greatest miracle that has been performed? The greatest miracle that has been performed is that many, many people, hundreds and thousands, their minds, their hearts, and their souls are led to the path, in the path, and nearer towards divinity. Many people have learned to realize that divinity resides in them. Many people have not only realized this by the mind, but actually experienced this divine power. Now, what greater miracle than this could there ever be? What greater miracle could there be for man now on earth to be, through simple techniques, to experience divinity within themselves? Can anyone show me a greater miracle? And this miracle is based upon self-betterment. Do it yourself principle. And that is still a greater miracle, because here we are leading people to do things themselves and not get things done for them. That is still a greater miracle. So therefore we are happy. Okay, is your time up? Sir. Step would be to banish the idea. We banish the idea that subjectivity and objectivity are identical. The thing between, the interference between that lies in the identification is the idea of identification. Now, who has the idea? There must be a entity that formulates the idea. So still a duality remains. So even in identification, having the idea of identification, a duality remains, because there is a part of our mechanism that gives us the idea, that differentiates subjectivity from objectivity, and even when the two are identified, there is a cognition, an idea, and an idea cannot remain on its own. There has to be some entity that forms the idea. So then it is not total identification. Now, to bring about total identification, three things disappear. The conception disappears. In other words, the idea of identity disappears. When the identity, the idea of identity disappears, then the object disappears and the subject disappears. And when all this has been annihilated, when all this has become nothing, or has merged away into a nothingness, then only is there total unity. Now, the self-realized man you speak about, which you have related to Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, these are just modes of expression. It is not necessary to know if they were historical personages, but it suffices to know that they are certain classifications of the one indefinable object. Now, Brahma is regarded to be the creator, Vishnu is regarded to be the preserver, and Shiva the dissolver. Now, these three aspects are the qualities of one thing. In every human being, there is a creative element. Now, as we sit here, it is a true fact, although we do not feel it or know it, that every cell is recreating itself. Every cell of our body, and there are billions and billions of cells in our body that are continually recreating themselves. In the process of recreation, there is a momentary gap between creation and dissolution, and that momentary gap is preservation. So, Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva are aspects of one entity, of the one particular cell that we are talking about now, and this creation and the little lapse of time before dissolution is there, and it can be experienced in a moment. Now, if this happens in a single cell within the human body, then the same structure, the same process is happening in the world. The same process is happening in the solar system. It is happening in the galaxy, and it is happening in the whole universe. Earlier this evening I said that the universe, the construction of the universe is in a single atom. And if we know the workings of a single atom, we know the entire workings of the whole universe. So these are aspects still born of the relative. These are aspects still within the realms of the relative, and due to the laws of nature which are there for the purpose of this formulation being creation, preservation and dissolution, are there operating on all levels of existences, from the single unitary cell in one's body to the entire universe. Now, the self-realized man is the man that has gone beyond all the laws of nature. He has transcended all nature, because although his body functions within natural laws, he is one that can stand aside, can stand apart from the workings of natural laws. So such a man, a realized man, is a law unto himself. He is a law unto himself. And that is what the Bible means when it says that you are in the world, yet not of the world. Such a man is a Buddha, a Krishna, a Christ. He is in the world and yet not of the world. The mind of man has not the capacity to comprehend such a man. The mind of ordinary man can only understand such a man according to his own capacity. Sorry? Good. Fine. Now I just say that to take a breath.
A little oil for the boys.
Water to the well. Thank you, Amrit. That was lovely. Cheers.
Skull.
Skull. Good. So, such a man, a divine man, a God man, a God man cannot truly be understood by the ordinary mind. But such a man can be experienced by the ordinary man. Such a man can be experienced by the ordinary man, not from the mind level or the level of the intellect, but from the heart level. So therefore, in our meditational practices, we develop the heart more than we develop the mind. The mind naturally gets a greater awareness, its perception increases, its mind expands, but the greater expansion is the heart. And when the heart expands, then that personage, that God-man is felt and experienced so beautifully that the joy that is that God-man, the love that is that God-man, penetrates our very being, and we too feel the divinity of that love, and that uplifts us. So, to define a God-man, to define a divine man, to define an incarnation, to define an avatar, is beyond the conception of the human mind. But his love is so great, that he can be felt. Felt means he can be experienced within ourselves, so powerfully experienced. And that is the purpose of our meditation, to experience the divinity. Now, divinity is to most an abstract concept. Divinity is abstract, so we try to experience divinity through the concrete. So when someone tells me he has faith in Christ, I say, yes, very good, have faith in Christ, because through the concrete form of Christ you will experience the abstract form of Christ, then truly will we know the meaning of his words that I and my Father are one. When Christ says, I and my Father are one, means that I, the concrete, and I, the abstract, are one. The same thing applies. The same thing applies to the concept of Krishna or to the concept of Buddha. The teachings of theology, the teachings of various religions have to be very deeply understood. The trouble in the world today, and what has caused most trouble, is the misinterpretation, is by taking all those great writings, the great scriptures, very, very literally. By taking it very, very literally, we miss the woods for the trees. Or is it the other way around? For the trees for the woods. Yeah. We do that. So, we have to experience the finite mind, as I say over and over again, could never comprehend the infinite. So, we use the finite mind and direct the finite mind to that which is finite also. That is the concrete Christ. And through practices of meditation, we experience the abstract Christ. Then do we know what Christ consciousness is? Because we then become identified with that divine consciousness. And we do not need mental cognition of Christ consciousness, because we become Christ consciousness ourselves. Then there is no lover, there is no beloved, but there is just love. The subject ceases, the object ceases, the idea of the relationship between subject and object also disappears, and just that love exists. And that is why when the scriptures tell us God is love and love is God, that is the true meaning of what that means. So, we have from time to time incarnations. They come with this purpose to bring to men's hearts, this message of love. Many people say that they are incapable of this love. So to those, they are started off with hope. And all scriptures say that hope is never lost. Good. Now these are very, very simple teachings. During the time when Buddha lived, or Krishna lived, or Christ lived, perhaps people's minds were not as sophisticated or technologically minded or intellectual as they are today, perhaps, because today everyone wants to weigh everything with analysis. You, even a child, even these beautiful children here, you tell them the paint on the wall is wet, and you can be sure they'll go and experiment. Yes, they'll go and analyze it with a finger, yeah, to see if it's really wet. Right? So we all are like the children. We want to experiment. Fine. So during those times, and especially more so for primitive minds, people were told, have love, have faith, believe, accept, and thou shalt be saved. Today, if you tell that to young people mostly, that don't know what a thing is, but they know something about a thing. You tell them these things, have love, have faith, believe. To them it makes no sense. So we use the same age-old principles of hope and love in a different way. So from time to time, when these incarnations come on earth, they give the same age-old eternal message in a different way. They give it in a different way to suit the minds and the modes of people and the moods of people. They give their teachings in such a way. Teachings today have to be to a great extent rational. They have to be pleasing to the mind to a certain extent, where a little glimmer of faith can be awakened. The mind says, look, there is something in this teaching. Fine, that is given. Then a technique is given whereby they experience that little thing which their minds start believing. So the minds start believing that there is something beyond the limitations of ourselves. After that, when techniques are given, then they start experiencing that. And that is how the unbeliever can be made to believe, because we give them the experience. The understanding that is given to them is firstly on a logical, rational level, and in that rationalization, although all rationalizations, all intellectualisms are not complete in themselves, but that leads them to try and find something more. It gives them a slight recognition or a little cognition that there is something higher and better than just these 5 senses that we have. People today only want to believe or accept things which they can touch, smell, see, taste, feel. But with the experiences given to them through our meditational practices, they start experiencing that there is a deeper, there is a more subtler level to this existence of ours which we call life. Then through these processes we make them experience life. Up to now people just exist, they don't live. Existence, when a person just drifts along and just exists, then there is no aim. But once they start realizing that there is something deeper, through their practices, when they experience there is something more, then they start living. And when people really start living and start experiencing and realizing the deeper meanings of life, then they start loving. So when we tell people, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, that will not make sense to people. That will not make sense to people. Mrs. Jones next door is so terrible, how can I love her? Mrs. Jones is so terrible, she's shouting all the time across the fence. How can I love her? Right. My boss finds faults in all my work, how can I love him? Good. My friend done me down, How can I love him? You see. So it is useless to say, love thy neighbor as thyself. It is useless to tell that. It is useless to preach it in this way from the pulpits. And that is the greatest mistake that is being done today, and that is why our churches are becoming emptier and emptier and emptier. The modern teaching today that I bring to you is this, that through the techniques that you practice, you cease to exist and you start to live. And when a person experiences the finer levels of living, you automatically experience the love that is behind living. Then you love to live. Now, if you can really love to live and find the essence of life and living existent in everything we see, hear, touch, smell, we are still using the five senses. If we can see the essence of living in everything around us with our five senses and with a bit of using our minds, then we will see that there is that oneness in all. And when we see the oneness in all, we start loving everyone. Right. Good. So if your little sister is naughty tomorrow, you will still say, there's something inside her that is good, and that something inside me is also good, and what is good is God, so I must love God and I must love her. Right. Good. So that is the difference. That is the difference between the modern day spiritual master and the olden day spiritual master. He adjusts his teachings to the present, and it's the same old teachings. He adjusts the teachings to the present way of life so that those teachings can be readily accepted, they can be readily experienced, and they can be readily lived towards greater joy and fulfillment in the path of divinity. And divinity is that what you are. Okay. Fine. Good.
Lord T, you've spoken of God, man.
Mm-hmm. I
How many
haven't.
devils?
I haven't.
Satan, Lucifer, Beelzebub.
I can't.
I don't just bring it up.
I can't tell you much about devils because I haven't met one yet. Yes, the devil that people talk of, and that some scriptures talk of, is spoken of more in a figurative sense. In every human being there is a higher and lower self. We discussed this in one of our talks, that within man there is the animal, there is the man, and there is the God-man. Good. Now, it is the nature of a tiger to kill. It is the nature of a tiger or a lion to kill. That is its nature, that is its dharma. But when a man kills, it is not his nature to kill. So what he is doing is he is drawing out the animal nature within him, a lower form of life, into his higher man form of life, and acting according to the lower instincts, the baser instincts, he is invoking the devil. That is the true devil. Now, when man invokes by good actions the higher self that is within him, man is placed in the middle, sometimes fortunately or perhaps unfortunately. So, if he draws upon the lower levels of himself, then he is invoking the devil that is within himself. But when he invokes the higher portion of himself, then he is invoking the gods. So the devil is not someone sitting somewhere in the cosmos with a tail and a
Pitchfork.
and a fork.
Pitchfork, right?
Pitchfork, right? And in the same way, there is no God also sitting somewhere in the clouds on a throne with a big beard. All this, the devil and the God, the devil and the God permeate all existence. The devil and the God permeate all existence everywhere, omnipresently, and especially in man. He has his higher nature and his lower nature. The lower nature can be equated to the devil, and the spelling of devil will tell you evil with a D in front of it. Right. And the higher nature is also there, coexistent. It is like a coin. If you accept a coin, you accept the heads and you accept the tail of the coin. Fine. Perhaps the tails of the coin could represent the devil because it has a tail. You see. But now, how we use it through the instruments given to us, that is the question. Do we invoke the basic or the lower nature of ourselves and thereby shaking hands with the devil, or do we invoke the higher nature and shake hands and walk with the divine man? There's a lovely song I heard some while ago, a hand in hand with the man of Galilee or something. It is very, 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 very beautiful. Very beautiful, yes. And that is how we walk hand in hand with goodness or hand in hand with that which is not good. Now this, of course, is answered on a completely theological basis. The philosophical basis or metaphysical basis is far different. The theosophical or metaphysical basis is a basis where it does not recognize good or evil, because that basis, from that absolute stand, from the absolute stand of a beautiful oneness, all the laws of opposites cease. We have been discussing this on the level, the plane of relativity. But once one transcends through our meditational practices or through our other yogic practices, we go beyond good and bad, white and black, cold and hot. We are beyond it all. And from that beyondness, all the workings of relativity becomes non-existent. We do not recognize it. When our mouths are filled with nectar, amrit, we do not care for little teaspoons of sugar. Yes, and that is how it works. So stay away from devils, be a good boy. Yes, yes. Hilary?
Coming on from that question, until very recently I thought that the only evil was in man. And I was somewhat startled when someone said, oh no, there is something called cosmic evil.
Yes.
More than I had
Yes, yeah, I think I explained that a little earlier in a different form. that whatever is in the atom is there existent in the universe. Now in that way, the evil that we describe, which we talked about now, that can exist. It is also within the framework of the laws of nature, as we discussed, that is governed by the three qualities of tamas, rajas and sattva. If it is there in a small measure, it also exists in a bigger measure. So you have the little evil and you have the cosmic evil. It is all the same, all the same. It is good and evil is just a matter of scales, which one balances to which way. And with our meditational practices, we preserve the tranquility, and not only preserving the tranquility, but we let the sattvic, the good sides of ourselves dominate. Now, this does require conscious effort. This does require conscious effort. Our meditation helps us, strengthens us for this conscious effort, whereby we can consciously try and live good, sincere, honest, joyful, happy life. And then we too can consciously try and love our neighbors as ourselves, because with the meditational practices we open up our hearts, expand our hearts, and in that expansion of the heart we gain the qualities of compassion, of love, of forgiveness. Yes, yes. And it not only helps us, but it also helps the other person who is supposedly evil, because the force of love and forgiveness and charity is so powerful that the vibrations set up by that must affect even the evilest or the hardest soul. And that is why we have the saying that music soothes the savage beast. Music soothes the savage beast. By that is meant that if we have the harmony within ourselves, if we have created that harmony within ourselves, then that harmony reflects on that which is unharmonious and helps that object too to become more harmonious. Yes? Okay, good, sorry.
Raj, what about angels and guardian angels? Are they more highly evolved entities that guide us?
Well, I'm here.
Yes. Now, that is a bit difficult to answer, because firstly, I cannot bring down an angel or a guardian angel to show you. Right. So the acceptance of the idea of angels and guardian angels is necessarily a supposition. But there are forces. There are forces in the cosmos, there are forces in the world that are of a light nature. Now, what we mean by light nature is that they are of a higher vibrational substance. A higher their vibrations are higher. Fine. Now, it is by us heightening our vibrational status by our meditations that we would find those higher vibrations, call them angels, guardian angels, call them whatever. We can draw those higher vibrations to us, and thereby they could be helpful to us. That is what it means. Okay.
Guru Shakti refines vibration of the heart. How is it that we can draw on it then?
Yes. Fine. Because the Guru is a living Guru, and he projects it, he vibrates it He vibrates it eternally. The sun shines, and the meanest of creatures, the meanest insect or the highest evolved man still benefits from the heat and the radiance of the sun. So even if we are not highly evolved, we still, by attuning ourselves in that direction, receive the benefit, the heat, the light, the nourishment from the sun. So it is not necessary to only draw. It is not necessary for a person to be highly evolved to be able to draw on Guru Shakti. Now the higher vibrations we spoke about on Carol's question are also form part and parcel of that Guru Shakti. Guru Shakti is at the highest level, and the angels we speak of are definitely a bit higher than us. So there is a whole range. For on which the sun can shine. Now, in a forest dense with trees, the sun would filter through less. In a clear area and through a cloudless sky, the sun would give off its full radiance. It depends upon us. And as the sun is forever shining, as I said, on the meanest little insect to the highest man, the sun is still there. But the higher the vibration we have, the higher we are in the stage of evolution, the more and more heat we feel. And this is natural. The closer we go to the fire, the more heat we naturally would feel. Yes, but if we sit a distance away from the fire, we still feel heat. The closer we go through our meditational practices, more and more heat is felt, and it happens that so much heat is felt that our vibrations are so heightened that a lot of our karma passes away. A lot of our karma is dissolved unnoticeably and unsufferingly. That is the beauty. That is the beauty, one of the greatest beauties in our practices of meditation, where karma is there. Karma is not thrown away, but dissolved with the least amount of suffering and pain, sometimes even unconsciously. Yes. Okay.
Guruji, what you were just talking about, all of the great personages that you were speaking of earlier, the God-men like Krishna and Buddha and Christ, they all had aspects of them which manifested intelligence and will, but above all they manifested love, and it was compassion that set them apart, that made them so distinctive. Now, the law of karma is a law which is sort of like a stern judge. It just says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But springing from this compassion, all of these teachers brought a quality which is called grace. Now, in some traditions, they may use a somewhat different language to describe that. For instance, in Christianity, the word grace is used, and they speak of forgiveness of sins and so on. But I wonder if you can talk about the relationship between karma, or in modern language, the law of karma, and what might be appropriate for modern times is to call it the law of grace.
Yes, very, very beautiful. Very beautiful. The law of karma would tell us what the Bible tells us, that whatever you sow, so shall ye reap. That is what the law of karma tells us. The law of karma is the law of action. Now, action has many forms. Action is by thought also. By thinking, it is action. Action is also by deed. What we do, that is grosser action. Thought is subtle action, deed is grosser action. Now, it can also be expressed by a form that is in between the two. Word, thought, word, deed. All these things constitute action in a finer form or in a grosser form. Now, if we study the law of karma, we have to take into account the law of cause and effect, because cause and effect is part and parcel of the law of karma. The law of karma cannot exist without cause and effect. Cause and effect are the characteristics of karma. So, what we do, we will get its benefit of good deed will have good benefit, good returns, bad deed will have bad returns. And we are responsible for all our actions. Our actions in turn are motivated by our past. Now, by past we do not only mean this life, but it can go back in the past of many lives before. So, as I said a few times, that we are the sum totality of our past, and that past is in us in the form of what we term sanskaras. Sanskaras are impressions of all our existences, all our thoughts, words and deeds, which form and formulate a pattern of our future behavior, of our future thought, word and deed. This is very simply illustrated by the fact that if you put a child, mix up a child with friends that are not good friends, that do not do good actions, the child naturally would be influenced in performing bad actions too. Now, this is a superficial example, but when it comes to the behavior of a person, it is not only superficial actions, the motivation of superficial actions, but there are deeper impressions within our consciousness. You might call it subconscious. You might call it the subconscious mind, which is the repository of all those impressions, and the totality, the experience of those impressions form the pattern of our present life and motivate us into certain form of action. Fine. They motivate us into certain form of action because the nature of those impressions, the nature and the activity of those impressions is to formulate tendencies within us which spurs us on to the actions we do. Fine. So a pattern is created in this lifetime whereby we are subconsciously motivated in doing the actions we are doing. Now, when we come to a realization through our meditational practices, when we come to a realization that